Welcome to Scintica. I'm guessing you clicked on this video to learn about our products and how they can help you on your scientific journey. Well, let me tell you something. We want to help you find the right tools and ensure your research is precise and accurate. Because you know what they say, exceptional minds require exceptional tools. So hit the subscribe button and follow us on our social media here, and here. So now, let's talk science.
I'm Katie Parkins, and I'm a scientific product manager at Scintica. And today I'm here with Sydney Mensen, also from Scintica, and she's going to be discussing the Doppler flow velocity system that we have. Hi, Sydney. Can you start just by telling me a little bit about your role at Scintica?
Hi, Katie. I'm a scientific product manager with the physiology division at Scintica. I help scientists with their research every day.
And can you tell us a little bit more about why you're so passionate about the Doppler flow velocity system?
Yeah, the Doppler flow velocity system, or we call it short form DFVS, is a great tool for evaluating cardiovascular physiology and function in small animals. It's non-invasive, much easier to learn than an ultrasound system, and it provides accurate measurements of blood flow velocity.
Can you explain a bit about what you mean by Doppler, just for those of us who are unfamiliar?
Sure. The Doppler effect refers to the change in frequency in a wave in relation to an observer who's moving relative to the wave source. So a Doppler ultrasound can estimate how fast blood flows by measuring the rate of change in its pitch or frequency.
And can you explain a bit how the system works?
Absolutely. So using small handheld probes similar to this one here, the DFVS operates quickly without need for imaging to reach blood vessels with high accuracy. The flow velocities and differentials in various arteries, including the aorta, are reliably measured by placing the tip of this probe in line with the blood vessel at a shallow angle relative to the direction of the flow in order to measure the velocity. The high-frequency sound waves are then bounced off of the blood vessels, and then the returning sound waves are picked up by the probe.
And there's quite a few things here on the table. Are you able to tell us, what different components make up the system?
Absolutely. So as you can see, the DFVS is quite compact and easily transportable. So this is pretty much the whole system here, as well as down here we have the rodent surgical monitor. Our gray box here is the transceiver, and this is what we use in order to change the parameters of the sound waves and the depth of those sound waves as well. The box underneath is the Doppler signal digitizer, and this is what's used for sampling and processing the Doppler signal. And then lastly, a laptop is the Doppler workstation, which has custom software for analysis, although it's not here right now. And then our rodent surgical monitor provides integrated ECG signals during your data collection.
Now, I have heard of other groups using cuff probes instead. So why would I not want to use cuff probes compared to the Doppler?
Great question, Katie. Cuff probes are invasive. So the user has to actually physically wrap the cuff probe around the vessel of interest. In contrast, the Doppler flow velocity system is completely non-invasive for small animal models. And this allows the user to acquire all the desired signals longitudinally without any surgical intervention. So the DFVS does work with larger animals, but it does require the use of invasive cuff probes. So again, the user would have to wrap the cuff around the vessel of interest, and then the Doppler system would pick up those signals.
And the probes that you're using, how durable are they? Do you find that people are having to replace them quite often?
Yeah, this question comes up a lot because people want to know how many they should be purchasing and how often they might need to replace these probes. They're actually extremely durable. So as you can see, it is encased in a steel casing, and this has all of the electronics and the crystal inside of that stainless steel casing. Actually, some people that I know have been using their probes for 10 plus years, so very durable.
And what type of researcher do you find could, really benefit from a system like this?
Really, anyone doing cardiovascular research could benefit from the Doppler flow velocity system. Specifically, though, any groups doing systolic and diastolic function, arterial stiffness, the transverse aortic constriction method or TAC banding, hypertrophy, and even coronary artery disease are all researchers who could be using the system.
Okay, and I mean, you say really anyone doing that type of research could benefit. How easy would it be for someone to learn this technology and consistently get the signals that you need?
Yeah, I had mentioned earlier it is easier to learn than a traditional ultrasound system, but we always provide hands-on training for new customers. So after the training and then some additional practice sessions by the user on their own, they're usually able to get consistent and accurate results and publishable data.
And then in terms of data, what type of measurements are you able to get from the system?
Yeah, so cardiac or diastolic function can be assessed under various conditions. Pulse wave velocity simultaneously, so using two probes at once to collect signals from two different locations and then calculate the transit time from point A to point B. It really is the system is really great for measuring that. As well, I mentioned TAC banding, so you can actually measure the severity of the TAC banding by comparing the left and right carotid velocities, as well as the pressure gradient across the TAC band can be estimated using stenotic jet velocity. And then induced responses in microvascular beds can be measured using the pulsatility and resistivity indices. Hyperemic velocity responses can also be evaluated by assessing coronary flow reserve, which is a function of cardiac work affected by disease, age, and pressure volume overload conditions. Banding effectiveness and coronary reserve are also measured by hyperemic over baseline velocity relations. Coronary flow distributions can be assessed through changes in the systolic-diastolic flow ratio. So quite a few.
That was a lot. What would you say are the most common obstacles or struggles that users face when using the system?
Many people initially don't understand how you can get these flow velocity signals from this non-invasive probe without actually having an image. So you can't visualize the blood vessel and structures of the heart the way that you can with an ultrasound system. Really, all you need is a general understanding of anatomy, and then learning the shapes and the timing of those waveforms, which are what we teach you with our training. They actually allow the user to accurately locate the vessel of interest. So you don't need the image to be able to see what vessel that you're targeting.
Now, although you don't need the image, you're saying, what if I already have an ultrasound system? It sounds like this wouldn't really be useful for me.
That's actually a misconception. So the DFVS is still a valuable preclinical tool for those who already use ultrasound in their research. Specifically, the pulse wave velocity using two probes simultaneously and peripheral vascular measurements are more suited for a dedicated Doppler system like this one due to the small probe size, as you can see here, and that allows for smaller angles between the vessel of interest and the probe. So pulse wave velocity, the DFVS is really fantastic for, because again, instead of using one imaging probe and calculating only in that image, you can widen the distance between those two measurements using two probes. Okay, Katie, I'm going to now show you a little bit more specifically how we acquire the signals with the Doppler flow velocity system. So we have a really nice heart model right here, and it shows all of the important vessels and the coronary arteries on the heart. So when we're using the Doppler flow velocity system, or the DFVS, you want to place your probe, which you can see is really small, about 2 millimeters in diameter, as in line with the vessel of interest. And that's giving you 0 to 15 degree angles, which is really important for blood flow velocity measurements. So I'm going to open this up, and I'll start with the mitral valve, which is right here. And that's why I open the heart up so that we can see it really nice and clearly. So normally on the mouse, you are going to place your probe just below the rib cage, and you would angle slightly up towards where that valve would be. So what we're getting is the flow from inside the valve, through the valve, and we would angle it towards that, towards the valve to get the blood flow velocity.
So Sydney, to get that signal, assuming in the in vivo situation that you can't see where the valve is, would you still, because I could see you're kind of placing the probe here, would the idea be to put it over top of the valve, or can it be this far away, I guess, to get a good signal?
Yeah, so in the animal model, the rib cage normally is in the way. So we don't want to approach from up here like this towards the valve over top of the mouse or the rat, because also we're trying to get that 0 degree angle. So from this heart model, you can see it's pretty much totally flat. So by placing the probe lower, first of all, under the rib cage, we're also able to get a 0 degree angle through that mitral valve. So that'll give us really beautiful mitral signals with the Doppler system. The next one, we can kind of see the aortic outflow. So the aorta is here, and we can see on the inside where that, from the left ventricle, that is. So that's where our next probe would be. Our next probe placement would be angled towards that. So all you have to do is rotate from this angle and just straighten out the probe. And then that way we're getting our aortic outflow signal. Alternatively, you can also approach from above. You can see that the aorta comes up and then wraps around and then comes down. So by approaching up top from the animal like this, we would then be able to get the flow right out of the aortic valve as well. So just use your preference for that one.
Maybe more of a general question. How similar, I guess, do you find the placing for each animal? Because obviously this is a perfect heart, we'll say. Do you ever find where these positions are, a little bit off from mouse to mouse, or harder to find?
Yeah, so most people performing measurements, they don't always have perfectly normal animals. There might be some treatment that was given to the animal, a surgical intervention, something like that. So sometimes there could be a rotation of the heart. So rather than sitting, a certain way, it could be rotated. Without having an image of the heart the way that you do with an ultrasound system, it's all about just kind of playing around until you find the correct signal. We would teach you what to listen for, what to look for on your Doppler software, and that way you're able to know when you have achieved the correct signal. And from animal to animal, it could vary, but for the most part, the heart will be situated the same way.
And then you briefly mentioned ultrasound. So with ultrasound, you have to apply ultrasound gel, and you're typically narrowing or shaving the area of interest. Do you need to do that for Doppler?
You do not. So that's part of the reason that the DFVS is has shorter signal acquisition times, or is considered easier to use. You don't need to even shave the animal, let alone near it. All you need is a little bit of water. You place that at the site on the skin that you would be placing your probe at. So let's say I was trying to get our mitral signal. I would place it just underneath the rib cage, the water, and then that acts as the conductor for the ultrasound, and I would place my probe right there. And that's usually enough. There are times where you might prefer to use ultrasound gel, or you just need to use it because the water maybe isn't working well for any reason. And in that case, ultrasound gel will work perfectly fine as well. I mentioned before that we can integrate ECG in real time with the collection of our Doppler signals. This is important to tell us whether the signal is happening in systole or diastole, and where on the QRS complex is it happening. So we do that through the rodent surgical monitor here. So we have 4 sets of electrodes, 4 for the mouse and 4 for the rat. or other small animal models work as well. And the way that we normally do it is we take our animal model and we just have to tape them down to these electrodes. So it's completely non-invasive, similarly to the DFVS. And all you need is a little bit of ECG cream, and you just tape all their paws down on here. This will maintain their body temperature, reported on this nice little tablet here, along with a bunch of other signals, including ECG leads 1, 2, and 3, whatever you're interested in, respiration rate, heart rate, and again, you can monitor core and body temperature. And this is important for not just to incorporate in the DFVS, but making sure your animal is doing well during the procedure. So once they're taped down to the platform, and you would have your anesthesia nose cone if you're using gas anesthesia, we would take our Doppler probe. All of our settings are done on this transceiver here, and we adjust according to the depth that we need the sound to travel. So that's dependent on the size of the animal and which vessel of interest we're targeting. So, for example, the mitral valve, which we talked about earlier, we would place our probe just right underneath the ribcage and angle towards where the mitral valve would be in the animal. And again, adjusting our depth on the transceiver here in order to achieve the optimal signal. It's also used with the DFVS in order to incorporate the ECG signals in real time.
And is this something that's included with the Doppler system, or is this like an add-on feature that people can purchase?
Yeah, so we encourage anyone who is doing, wants to use the DFVS to also have the rotosurgical monitor, specifically for the signals that does require having the ECG there. There are some signals in some cases where the RSM, the rotosurgical monitor, does not need to be purchased. For example, larger animals, when we would use a cuff probe, of course, they won't fit on this platform, so you wouldn't have this platform. Mm-hmm. Another example is with pulse wave velocity, we're mostly interested in the transit time it takes from probe 1 and probe 2. That in that case as well, ECG is not as important as, say, mitral valve or aortic outflow, which are cardiac signals.
And then you mentioned this could also be used on its own. Why would someone want to do that? I guess what other purpose does it have?
Yeah, so this is a great tool for anyone doing any kind of procedure where the animal might need to be anesthetized, whether it's invasive or non-invasive surgery, anything like that. Mm-hmm. It monitors all of the vital signs and then keeps the animal warm, keeping it at physiological temperature to maintain, in order to keep the animal safe and help with recovery and post-surgical care as well.
Now, earlier in our discussion, you had mentioned larger animal models. So is this system still applicable for those that are using animal models other than mice or rats?
Yeah, so I kind of hinted earlier about the cuff probes. So with the DFVS, there are cuff probes available for larger animal models. As well, the system has been used in a really wide variety of animal models, including guinea pigs, naked mole rats, zebrafish, giant danio, pigs, cats, and dogs. So with the cuff probes in the larger animals, you just wrap the cuff around the vessel of interest, how I explained earlier, and then the leads are tunneled and plugged into the Doppler system.
Now, with that long list of potential animal models, I have to ask, what is the most unique application of the Doppler system that you've seen amongst your users?
Yeah, recently a customer approached me who was interested in measuring velocity in cerebrospinal fluid in alligators. Now, normally, the CSF is non-echogenic and cannot be picked up by the Doppler ultrasound. However, they plan to inject echogenic material into the CSF, and the flow then becomes echogenic, meaning that they will have the ability to reflect the ultrasound waves, and we will be able to measure the flow velocity in the alligator spinal cord. So I'm really looking forward to the data that comes out of that.
Me too. That's very cool. Sydney, thanks so much for all of this relevant information. We hope this information will help everyone start to understand the Doppler flow velocity system and its potential relevant applications. Please feel free to leave your comments on our YouTube channel and subscribe. And feel free to reach out or call our application specialists, including Sydney, at our website. And thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Sydney.
Thanks, Katie.